Two bloody hands grabbed Marcus, Bear Thompson's wrist. "Mister, my sister not breathing right now." A 10-year-old boy, barefoot, left eye swollen shut and turning purple, shaking so hard his teeth clicked together, his Avengers shirt torn clean through, hanging off one shoulder like somebody had ripped it, trying to hold him back. He wasn't crying. He was past that. "Please, God, please come home with me." Blood from his feet smeared the gas station tile. Mama and Rico, they did it together this time. Bear's cigarette fell from his mouth and died on the floor. 12 bikers stood up at once. The Iron Saints MC had been celebrating in that Shell station on Lamar Avenue. Charity Run went perfect. Cold beer, loud jokes, the kind of Memphis night that feels like a reward. That ended the second those bloody hands found Bear's arm. "How long she been not breathing?" Bear crouched down to meet the boy's one working eye. Voice low, steady, the kind that cuts through panic. "I don't know." The boy, DeAndre Carter, Dre. If you knew him from Orange Mound, couldn't stop his jaw from trembling. Rico was holding her under the water, and Mama said... His voice cracked into something that wasn't a word anymore. Mama said, "Hold her longer." Behind Bear, Doc Ramirez, Army medic, hands that had held soldiers together in worse places than this, was already pulling gloves from his vest pocket. "Where?" Bear asked. "Carnes Avenue. Brown Building. Apartment 6. Dre's bloody fingers dug deeper into Bear's wrist. "Door's still open. I didn't close it. I just ran. 4 blocks. This boy had run 4 blocks with no shoes. Glass and gravel had shredded his feet raw. His eye was swelling from something that looked like a grown man's fist, and instead of calling 911, instead of pounding on any door he passed, instead of collapsing on the sidewalk like any other child would, he ran to strangers in leather, because the stories about the bikers at the Shell station were the only hope he had left. His sister, Nevia, 6 years old, everybody called her Nev, hadn't been to school in 3 weeks. People noticed, nobody did a thing. Bear stood up, all 6'6" of him. He looked at his brothers. Chains was already throwing cash on the table. Pope had the door. Doc was halfway to his Harley. Nobody needed words. Bear put one heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. Lead, 12 engines roared to life, and a barefoot, bleeding child ran ahead of them through the humid Memphis night, leading judgment on wheels toward an apartment where his baby sister's braids were floating in cold bathwater, where her lips had already turned blue, where her mama sat on the toilet lid, watching, rocking, saying she'll be all right, she always comes back. 4 blocks away the whole time. Help was 4 blocks away. And nobody came until a 10-year-old decided that strangers were safer than his own mother. 12 Harleys split the night behind a running child, and while they rode, let me tell you what that boy knew, what no 10-year-old should ever know. Dre knew his mama used to be different. LaToya Carter used to braid hair on the front porch, used to hum old songs while she worked, voice sweet and easy, used to make sure Nev's barrettes matched her dresses, used to check homework and fuss about bedtimes and smell like cocoa butter when she hugged them goodnight. That was before Rico. Rico with the pretty smile and the smooth talk. Rico who moved in 6 months after Daddy left and never moved out. Rico who kept little rocks in a Crown Royal bag and called them his medicine. LaToya tried the medicine once, then twice, then the pipe became more important than groceries, more important than rent, more important than the 2 children watching their mama disappear behind her own eyes. Dre knew the exact week his mother stopped being his mother. Same week, Rico started looking at Nev different. "Bath time," Rico would say. Just those 2 words, and Nev would go stiff like a rabbit that heard a hawk. She always came out quiet, sometimes bleeding. Dre learned not to ask. He learned a lot of things he shouldn't have. He learned that the closet under the stairs was where they put Nev when she acted bad. 2 days sometimes, no food, no light. Nothing but dark and the smell of her own piss running down her legs because nobody came when she cried. Dre would sit outside that closet door for hours, whispering stories through the crack, fairy tales he remembered from before, made up stuff about princes and dragons and happy endings that didn't exist in apartment 6. He'd whisper until Rico dragged him away by the neck. He learned what sounds to ignore at night: wet sounds, hurting sounds, his mama's voice, fake moaning through the wall, so Rico would love her better, so Rico would stay, so the medicine would keep coming. He learned that the first time was the worst time, because Mama helped. Mama held Nev down on the mattress and told her to be still, be quiet. This is just what men do. Told her Rico needed to break her in gentle, so it wouldn't hurt as bad later. Dre heard his sister screaming through 2 walls. He was 8 years old. He learned how to steal Vienna sausages from the corner store and split 1 can 2 ways for dinner because the food stamps went up Rico's nose, and Mama didn't notice anymore. He learned how to lie to teachers about the bruises, lie to CPS about the burns shaped like cigarette cherries on Nev's thighs, lie to the nurse who asked too many questions and then stopped asking. He learned how to press his ear to Nev's chest at night, counting heartbeats, making sure she was still alive. 1, 2, 3, 4. Still breathing, still here, still his little sister. That was the only prayer Dre knew anymore. Tonight had been worse than all the other nights combined. Rico came home with his jaw tight and his eyes dead. Dope was short. Somebody skimmed him. He was in the kind of mood that usually ended with holes in the wall and blood on the floor. LaToya was already high, eyes swimming, barely standing, and Nev had wet the bed again. She was 6. She couldn't help it anymore. Her body didn't work right after everything they'd done to it. The doctors would later find damage that made grown detectives leave the room to cry. But Rico didn't see a traumatized child. He saw disrespect. He grabbed Nev by her braids and dragged her down the hallway. Her small hands clawed at his wrist. Her feet kicked at the air. "Rico, baby, don't mark her face," LaToya called from the couch. Worried about the wrong thing. "Please don't mark her face." Dre hid in the hallway, peeking around the corner, heart slamming against his ribs. Rico threw Nev into the bathroom, turned on the cold water, let the tub fill while Nev pressed herself against the far wall, shaking, those big brown eyes, looking for help that wasn't coming. Rico grabbed her by the back of the neck, shoved her face into the water, held her there. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, pulled her up. She gasped, coughed, water streaming down her face, too scared to scream. "You want to piss on my sheets?" Rico's voice was calm. That was the worst part. He wasn't yelling. "I'll teach you about water." He pushed her under again, longer this time. Her little legs kicked against the side of the tub. Her hands slapped the surface. Bubbles rose and popped. LaToya appeared in the doorway, cigarette in one hand. Leaning against the frame like this was just another Tuesday, she watched her daughter drown, and she nodded. Rico pulled Nev up. She vomited water and bile. Her lips were starting to turn blue. He pushed her under again. This time the kicking slowed. This time her hands stopped slapping. This time she went limp. Rico yanked her up by the braids. Her head hung loose, eyes half open, not coughing, not gasping, nothing. "Oh, she out." Rico let her body sag into the water, stepped back. "Damn, she out." LaToya took a drag of her cigarette, blew smoke toward the ceiling. Her voice was flat as pavement. "She's still twitching. Hold her longer." If you believe every child deserves someone who'll fight for them, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe. We've got more stories that'll remind you why protection matters. That's when Dre ran. He didn't think about shoes, didn't think about the door, didn't think about anything except the Shell station 4 blocks away, where the bikers parked their motorcycles on Friday nights. He'd heard stories, grown folks on the corner talking about the Iron Saints, how they showed up at court for kids too scared to testify, how they sat outside houses where bad men lived until the bad men moved away, how they looked like nightmares but fought like angels. Dre didn't know if the stories were true. He just knew nobody else was coming. 4 blocks of broken glass and gravel, 4 blocks with his feet tearing open on every step, 4 blocks of praying. God, please let them be there. God, please let them help. God, please don't let Nev die while I'm running. The Memphis night was thick and humid, and Dre ran through it like his sister's last breath was chasing him. Because it was. Now 12 Harleys thundered down Carnes Avenue, judgment on wheels. The apartment building rose up in the headlights, brown brick, busted windows, the kind of place where people learned to mind their business because minding your business kept you alive. Front door of apartment 6 still hanging open, TV noise bleeding out into the night, blue light flickering from inside. Bear killed his engine first. Doc was off his bike before it stopped rolling, boots hitting concrete, already moving toward that open door. The smell hit them from 20 feet away. Bleach. And something sweeter. Something wrong. Dre stood at the bottom of the steps, barefoot and bleeding, looking up at the apartment where he'd left his sister floating face down in 2 inches of bathwater. Please, he whispered, please let her still be there. He didn't say alive. He couldn't make himself say it. Bear put a hand on his shoulder, squeezed once. Then 12 men in leather walked into hell with the lights on. Doc Ramirez didn't wait for his engine to die. He vaulted the porch railing while his Harley was still rolling, boots hitting the wooden slats hard enough to crack them. Through the open door, TV screaming some reality show at an empty room, blue lights strobing across water-stained walls, the smell of bleach so strong it burned the back of his throat, and underneath it, something sweeter, something that smelled like the beginning of death. Doc rounded the corner into the bathroom, and his heart stopped. Nev lay face down in the bathtub, 2 inches of water, body the color of a bruise, little braids floating around her head like seaweed, arms limp at her sides, not moving, not breathing. LaToya sat on the toilet lid 3 feet away, rocking back and forth, cigarette burning down to her knuckles. Her eyes were somewhere else entirely. She'll be all right, LaToya muttered to nobody. She always come back. She always come back. And Rico. Rico stood over the tub with a hairdryer in his hand, cord plugged into the wall outlet, finger on the switch, looking down at that little girl's body like he was deciding something. Doc understood, in one terrible second, what was about to happen. He moved. Shoulder checked Rico so hard the man flew backward into the hallway wall. The hairdryer clattered across the tile and skidded under the sink. Rico's head bounced off the plaster, and he slid down, dazed, blinking. Doc didn't look at him again. He scooped Nev out of the water with both arms. She weighed nothing. Water and something darker poured off her body, soaking his vest, running down his jeans. Her lips were gray. Her eyes were half open, seeing nothing. He couldn't find a pulse. Living room, now. Doc carried her through the doorway, past Rico, who was trying to stand, past LaToya, who was still rocking and muttering, into the space where the carpet was stained but flat. He laid Nev down and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, heel of his hand against her tiny chest, counting out loud, voice cracking on every number. 4, 5, 6. Bear came through the front door like a freight train, He saw Rico stumbling out of the bathroom, hand pressed to his bleeding head, and something in Bear's face went cold and ancient. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed Rico by the throat, lifted him clean off his feet, and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. "Don't," Bear said. "One word. Quiet. Move." Rico's feet dangled 6 inches off the ground. His hands clawed at Bear's wrist. His pretty smile was long gone. 7, 8, 9. Chains, and Pope had Latoya now. She didn't fight them, didn't even seem to notice. Just kept saying it over and over while they pressed her to the floor. "I didn't want to. I didn't want to. I loved him too much. I didn't want to." Like that meant something. Like that excused any of it. 10, 11, 12. Dre appeared in the front doorway. 2 bikers stood on either side of him, blocking his view, trying to protect him from what was happening on that living room floor. But he pushed between them, had to see. His sister's body jerking with each compression, Doc's hands working, Doc's voice counting, Doc's eyes wet. 13, 14. "Come on, baby girl." Doc's whisper broke into pieces. "Come on, come back." 15. Silence. Every man in that room held his breath. The TV was still screaming about somebody's divorce, or somebody's makeover, or some other thing that didn't matter at all. Doc tilted Nev's head back, breathed into her mouth, watched her chest rise and fall. Nothing. He started compressions again. 1, 2, 3. Bear's grip tightened on Rico's throat. Rico's face was turning purple now, but nobody cared. Nobody told Bear to stop. 4, 5. "Please," Dre whispered from the doorway, hands balled into fists. "Please, Nev." 6, 7. Doc leaned down, another breath, and Nev coughed. Weak, wrong, water and bile coming up. Her little body convulsed. But alive. Alive. A sound came out of that room. 12 men exhaling at once. Exhaling something they'd been holding for years, maybe. The weight of every kid they couldn't save. Every door they got to too late. Every story that ended in a small coffin. This one didn't end that way. Doc rolled Nev onto her side. She coughed again, then started crying. Thin, reedy sobs that were the most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. Dre broke through the bikers and dropped to his knees beside her. "I got you, Nev." His voice shook, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. "I got you. I'm here." She reached for him with one trembling hand. He took it, held on like he'd never let go again. If you're rooting for these kids, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us reach more people with stories like this. The sirens came 10 minutes later, 10 minutes too late, but the Iron Saints had been there, and that made all the difference. Paramedics took over for Doc, loaded Nev onto a stretcher, started an IV while her brother refused to let go of her hand. They had to let him climb in the ambulance with her. Nobody was separating those two. Police found what nobody had bothered to look for: the closet under the stairs, stained mattress, bucket in the corner, scratches on the door from small fingernails, Polaroid pictures in Rico's sock drawer, the kind that get men killed in prison, burn marks on Nev's body that matched the cigarettes in Latoya's ashtray, bite marks that matched Rico's dental records, DNA evidence that would haunt the crime lab technicians for years. Latoya took a plea deal before the trial. 40 years, no possibility of parole. She stood in front of the judge and said she was sorry, said she loved Rico too much to stop him, said she didn't know it was that bad. The judge said nothing, just signed the papers and called the next case. Rico went to trial because he thought his smile could save him, thought he could charm 12 strangers the way he'd charmed Latoya. The jury deliberated for 11 minutes. Death row. They would have come back sooner, but somebody needed to use the bathroom. Nev spent 87 days in the hospital, surgeries, skin grafts, therapy sessions with specialists who looked sick after reading her file. Dre never left. He slept in the chair beside her bed, ate whatever the nurses brought him, did his homework on the windowsill, held her hand during the nightmares, which came every single night. When the hospital social worker tried to make him leave, visiting hours, regulations, liability, she found Bear sitting in the hallway, legs stretched out, arms crossed, 300 pounds of don't even try it blocking the elevator. That boy ain't got no home to go to, Bear said, calm, final. He got us now. The social worker went back to her office and started the paperwork. The Iron Saints took both kids in. Legal foster care through Baca Connections, Bikers Against Child Abuse, a network that doesn't ask too many questions when children need protection and the system moves too slow. Bear's house had 2 spare bedrooms that hadn't been used since his own kids grew up and moved away. Now they had matching bedspreads and nightlights and a lock on the inside of each door, because Dre asked for locks, and Bear understood why without needing an explanation. The first night in that house, Nev slept for 11 hours straight. No nightmares, no screaming, just sleep, deep and safe and warm. Dre stayed awake until 3 a.m., sitting outside her door, listening to her breathe. Old habits die slow. But when he finally went to his own room, when he finally lay down on clean sheets that smelled like fabric softener instead of fear, he cried. For the first time since he was 7 years old, DeAndre Carter cried. Not because he was sad, because he was safe, and he hadn't known how heavy that fear was until he finally set it down. 2 years passed. Nev still woke up screaming some nights. The dreams never went away completely, but now when she screamed, she didn't scream alone. There was always somebody there. A biker on the couch with his boots by the door. Bear in the next room, Doc on speed dial. A whole chapter of men who looked like nightmares, but showed up like guardian angels every single time. She learned to say their names without flinching. Hawk, Pope, Chains, Vince, Doc, Bear. She learned that big hands could be gentle. She learned that loud voices didn't always mean pain. She learned that some men keep their promises. Dre grew 6 inches in those 2 years. Shot up like a weed, all elbows and knees, voice cracking and dropping into something deeper. He never took off the vest. The Iron Saints had given it to him 3 months after the rescue. Kid-sized, leather, the club patch stitched on the back. Honorary member, youngest in chapter history. He wore it to school, wore it to church, wore it to bed sometimes when the memories got loud. That vest meant something. It meant somebody chose him. The day Nev smiled for the first time, really smiled, not just a reflex, but a real smile that reached her eyes, Dre was wearing that vest. They were at the clubhouse. Somebody had put on old music. One of the guys was teaching Nev to play cards, letting her win, acting all shocked when she laid down a full house. And she laughed. This little giggle that turned into a real laugh, that turned into the kind of joy that seemed impossible 8 months before. Dre watched from across the room. He didn't say anything. He just zipped up his vest a little higher and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Anniversary night, 1 year since the Shell station, 1 year since the Barefoot run, 1 year since the breath that almost didn't come. The whole chapter gathered at the clubhouse, bikes lined up outside, beer on the tables, the kind of night that used to end in war stories and tall tales. Tonight was different. Dre stood up. 12 years old now, voice finally done cracking. Tall enough to look some of these men in the eye. He stood in front of the whole chapter, and he didn't look scared at all. I wanted to say something. The room went quiet. Y'all came when I begged. His voice was steady, stronger than it had any right to be. A bloody kid ran into a gas station asking strangers for help, and y'all came. That's big. I know that's big. He paused. But that ain't the thing I think about most. Bear leaned forward in his chair. The thing I think about, Dre continued, is that y'all stayed. Everybody else in my whole life left, or hurt us, or looked the other way. But y'all stayed when nobody else ever did. He reached into the pocket of his vest, pulled out a folded piece of paper, walked over to Bear, and held it out. Bear opened it. 7 crumpled dollar bills fell into his palm. Old bills, soft from years of handling, some of them taped together where they'd torn. That's tooth fairy money, Dre said. Been saving it since I was 7. Before everything got bad. Bear looked up at him. For gas money. Dre's voice finally cracked, just once. For the next kid who got to run barefoot. Bear couldn't talk for a long time. None of them could. Somebody coughed. Somebody else wiped their face real quick and pretended they weren't crying. Dre stood there in his leather vest, 12 years old, giving away everything he had, because somebody gave him everything first. Some nights, when the rides get quiet and the roads stretch out empty, you'll hear one of the old-timers say it real soft, like a prayer. We ride for the ones who can't run no more, and for the ones still running. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the monster wears your mama's face. Sometimes the danger lives in your own house. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. And sometimes, if you're lucky, if you're brave, if you run fast enough and pray hard enough, sometimes the angels ride Harleys. Sometimes they show up in leather and thunder. Sometimes they cry like babies when a little girl takes her first breath in safe arms. Nev is 11 now. Dre is 14. They're still in Bear's house. They're still healing. They're still loved. Thanks for riding with us tonight. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, heroes don't always look the way you'd expect. The ripples from that night at the Shell station haven't stopped. Dre volunteers with Baca now. Youngest member anyone can remember. Shows up at courthouses to sit with kids, too scared to testify. Walks them past the men who hurt them. Nobody messes with a kid who's got 20 bikers at his back. Nev draws pictures. Gave one to Doc last month. Stick figures on motorcycles, flying through a sky full of stars. She wrote at the bottom in crayon, "My family." Doc framed it, hung it in the clubhouse, right next to the chapter charter. Every new member sees it when they patch in. Every single one asks about it. And every single time, Bear tells the story about a barefoot boy, a drowning girl, a gas station on Lamar Avenue. About how 4 blocks was too far for some people, and not far enough for 12. About how the only thing you've got to do, the only thing that really matters, is show up and stay. The ripples still haven't stopped, and they never will.